Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Roger's Real-Time Talk Show event. Today, we actually did get Mark back into the stream, and I'd like to welcome you back, Mark. Thanks for showing up.
Yes, thanks.
Now, I went over the first half of what I was doing last week, and it was going through the separation of powers legislation and stuff like economic rights, you know, um, and how the budget of the judiciary is used by a lot of governments to manipulate, the government and everything through the judiciary. And then I started talking about stare decisis and jurisprudence and plenary powers. Like here in the United States, you know how the president has the power to give immunity to people and stuff like that. I covered some of that, and then pardons basically is what I should have said. And then I was talking about people, groups, corporations, entities, and how Congress has unlimited powers to pass laws, levy taxes, wage war, and arrest people. So I covered all that stuff. And then I also started talking about how Congress can also create charters, and that they can extend their unlimited powers to, like different entities and organizations, corporations, and stuff, so that they can set prices and on things like we have the Department of Energy. You know what I mean? And a lot of people believe that the Department of Energy is actually a governmental organization, but it's actually a non-governmental organization that sets the prices for energy here in the United States. And then you got like the Federal Reserve. They're not a governmental organization. They're a non-governmental organization. You got the IRS, Social Security Office. All those are non-governmental organizations, and a lot of people don't know that. And what it was is they used loopholes in the Constitution in order to get away with manipulating the law and coming up with them, which these organizations are actually constitutionally illegal if they made them into a government or a governmental office. You know what I'm saying? Like if they were directly controlled by the government, like the post office is, then it would be breaking the law according to the Constitution. So I went over that, and today I wanted to go further with the Constitution. And the one thing I wanted to bring up is, and this would actually be good too, because I'd like your take on how it is in England. But well, first of all, with the Constitution, it sets up a boundary of federal law. You know what I'm saying? It sets up the boundaries that the federal government we have here in the United States can actually get away with. So, like if it consists of acts of Congress, treaties being ratified by the Senate, or regulations promulgated by the executive branch, and case law originating from the federal courts, then they have to go according to the boundaries of the Constitution, according to the law. So if it doesn't pertain to the Constitution, that it's okay to have these laws, then they're illegal. You know what I'm saying? And when it comes to that, you go into what they call the United States Code. And you know how you were talking about codification and everything earlier, Mark?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. The United States Code is the official compilation of codification of general and permanent federal statutory laws. So they codify them, and that's what it basically is. And they have two of them, which is general, and then the other one is permanent. So that's where it falls down into is the United States Code, and that's all it basically is. It's a codification for federal statutories. Now, so long as they're in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, federal law treaties preempt conflicting state and territorial laws, and that's in all of the 50 states in the United States as well as the territories. Okay. Now, the thing that's about that, it is preemptive, but each state within the United States also has their own constitution. Okay, and the federal how can I say it? Federal isn't federal preemptive isn't universal. Okay, and it's actually limited. So in the United States, we have a dual sovereign system. All right, that's federalism, and states are basically what they call the plenary sovereigns. So that means that we basically have the plenary powers when it comes to being a sovereignty. You know what I mean? Because with our sovereignty, it's based upon the people in the country. You know, each person is a part of the sovereignty of the United States. So it gets kind of complicated right there, because you'll hear a lot of people here in the United States that says federal overpowers state laws and everything, and then you have vice versa, where people say that the state overpowers each of them. But the thing of it is the federal government is limited because they only have they only have the Constitution, the federal Constitution, to go off of, where each state has their own Constitution, which can give more freedoms to their citizens in this state, but in this state it doesn't have as many. You know what I mean? And then there's some that just have a Constitution that goes exactly as what the federal Constitution goes. You know what I mean? So you have different constitutions within each state, as well as our federal constitution that you're probably aware of, that you read. You know what I mean? So
I suppose one of the most obvious examples of this would be in relation to the selling and producing of cannabis for recreational purposes.
exactly,
As far as the federal government's concerned, it's illegal, but each individual state has their own rules about that.
exactly. Now, the thing that I was wondering is, like, in England, when it comes to your guys' constitutions, have you guys set up like that where England has their own constitution, Wales has theirs, Scotland, and Ireland?
Technically, no. The constitution is a written constitution, but not a codified constitution in this country. Technically, it's one constitution for the entire union.
So one constitution fits all of them. They don't have like
Yeah,
different constitutions in like different territories and stuff like that.
there are different laws. There's different regulations in different parts of the country or union, but the constitution per se is a singular.
Now, do you know if your guys' if your codes go according to your constitution? Is it like do you have code that's set like we have the United States code? Like, do you have any kind of law that's codification, and does it go according to your
Well,
constitution?
individual laws, statutes are codified, obviously. Um, how it works in this country is that a law is an act created by the House of Parliament, the lower house. So, House of Parliament, and then it gets reviewed by the House of Lords
Mm-hmm.
and passed left and back and forward until there's an agreement's made, and then it's sanctioned by the king or by the monarch.
Okay, so
So, which
you're
is
yeah.
technically just a rubber stamp exercise.
So that your king or would be the equivalent of the president, the executive branch.
The these days, I would say the monarch is just a rubber stamping exercise. In theory, it is there to uphold the rights of the citizen and the rights of the country, but arguably, it is just a procedural thing. I think so.
Okay, so does the prime minister fit in there anywhere?
Prime Minister being the head of the frontpiece, the mouthpiece, the leadership of, well, not leadership, but the front person of the government. So, if a act is being enacted or being reviewed for inaction or to be enacted in the UK, then it would be done through a government in which the Prime Minister is the head of, technically.
Okay, that
That
makes
makes sense.
that makes good sense. Yeah. So basically, what I'm hearing from it is the prime minister is doing the basic duties that the king and them maybe would have done back in the older days. Like, and the king's responsibility with, like you said, with the stamp is actually being changed over towards the prime minister. Is that kind of what's taking place there?
No. The king has to approve all laws within the UK and the Commonwealth. So let's
Okay.
say Canada came up with a law and it has to be stamped, approved by the monarch.
Okay. I got you.
So that is, again, it is more
Yeah.
of a procedural thing these days rather than an actual physical action.
It, it sounds more like he has the power of the president. Really, the more you look at it, like he would be the equivalent of the executive branch, and like your lower courts would be the House of Representatives here in the United States. You know, and what was the one above the there was
Technically, your House of Representatives would be House of Parliament.
Parliament, yeah.
in this country. Your Congress would be Congress
Well,
would
what the
be
Senate? The Senate. The Senate. What would
oh, the
that be?
Senate. Okay, the Senate would be the House of Lords.
Okay, the House of Lords. Okay, that that's makes a lot of sense. And then it goes to the king. Now, can the king veto something that's been introduced to him?
In theory, yes, but um, although I don't know. Let's say since Elizabeth II's time, I've got a theory that the monarch has been sort of scared into being reminded about what happened during the English Civil War.
You know, off with their heads. Off with
Well,
their heads. Yeah. Um,
that's so technically yes, but in reality, no.
okay. Now, when I was going through this, there were a couple of things that actually stood out to me where it talks about the state constitutions can grant broader rights to their citizens than that of the federal constitution, as long as they don't infringe on any of the federal constitutional rights. So here, if each state wants to grant a little bit more power to the people in their states than the states next to them, they can do it, but it can't infringe on the constitutional rights of the federal Constitution. You know what I'm saying? In other
Mhm.
words, they have to kind of go hand in hand with one another. They can't conflict with each other. Um, when a territory of England wants to make a law that doesn't go according to the laws of England, what holds them back from doing that? Do they go according to the Constitution that was set down in England, or
And like I said, the Constitution isn't codified. I think a good example of this would have been when the Scottish National Party last year or year before tried to push for a second national or Scottish um, um, election, or not election, a Scottish yeah, probably an election in relation to going independent. Um, the Scottish National Party tried to push for a second election in relation to an independent, but they tended to ignore the rights, the rules of the British or the UK government, and therefore I believe there was a legal challenge there, and they were forced not to.
okay? See, I know they had a situation where they did that in Canada too, where Canadians were given the option if they wanted to stay as a unified district, I guess, between Ontario, what's the area over there, and then Saskatchewan. I know
Oh,
that they were doing votes, and I think that was about 12 years ago. Though it was quite a while ago, but I remember hearing about that. I know it was voted down. They all wanted it to stay a part of the UK, United King, or the
mm,
British Empire or whatever. But
somewhere. I remember, I think 20, maybe 25 years ago, Australia tried to do the same.
Hmm. I was having a good conversation this morning with um, Bob Dub and Vincent, and I really liked what Vincent's take was on it. You know what I mean? Like, um, he has issues with his government and everything, but I asked him because I mean, if you listen to what he's saying, you could kind of get this impression if you didn't ask him that he had a problem with being a colony with the British, you
What
know,
country is it in?
in New
Sorry,
Zealand.
where does he? Okay, New
Yeah.
Zealand. Okay, yeah.
And I asked him up front. I was like, "Do you think the issue is being a colony?" And he said no. He actually said that the country is doing better now because they are a part of the British Empire. You know what I mean? And uh, he he said that that's not the issue there. It was actually more spiritual and stuff like that, in his opinion. You know, but
So,
that I thought
as
that
far
was
as I can,
interesting.
as far as I can see, as far as New Zealand is concerned, there has been a common sort of idea that New Zealand citizens are subjects of the government, and not the government being the subject of the citizenry. We saw
Hmm.
this with I can't think of her name. The prime minister that was during the COVID situation.
Yeah, that was
I
brought
can't
up
remember
too.
what they called. Yeah, I can't remember what the name is. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was brought up too. They came
yeah.
down on the real. They enforced some pretty harsh regulations over there with them. I know that much. And then I guess they did the same with you guys. Like they really came down hard on you guys with the regulations during the COVID, didn't they?
Yes and no. I um things like the vaccines were still technically volunteer um vaccines. So people like myself didn't actually uh, refuse to take them. Masks were there were some caveats in wearing masks. If you
Oh, we may have lost you. Give it a second. It might straighten out. I don't know for sure. You kind of froze up. There you go. He was getting to the good part, and they cut him off. We got you. Or they cut me off. One of the two. Either way. Yeah, hold on a minute. That would probably be me. Let me. Yeah, let me do this again. And come back in there. This was getting pretty good, too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they got me this time. It was my turn.
got me. Oh yeah, I've got both of us, I think.
Yeah. So, but you said it. There was a caveat when it came to the
Yeah.
face masks.
Mask. If you had a medical condition, then you weren't eligible to. It was not necessary for you to wear a mask. But the issue was that due to our data protection act, it would be illegal for and the 2010 Equality Act, it would be illegal for anybody to ask you about the condition.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, I refuse to wear a mask, and if somebody asks, then I say I've got a medical condition. and legally they wouldn't be able to ask why,
Mm-hmm. Now, see, we had a
because that would be discrimination.
we had a thing over here where they were trying to make it to where people could be kicked out of storefronts and stuff if they didn't wear a mask. And the states, well, actually, the federal government, I think, even stepped in on it and said that it's illegal because
Yeah,
you can't force somebody to wear a mask in a public facility if they don't wish to. So,
and that would probably be illegal under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
mm-hmm.
So,
But it's like if they could come up to me and they could say, "Look, can you please wear a mask?" And if I turn around and told them point blank, I don't want to wear a
yeah.
mask, then they can't say anything to me. You know what I mean? I thought that was okay because I kept hearing on the news about how they were over in Europe, especially like they were really
Mm.
forcing the issue on these people bad. Um,
Some countries, yeah, yeah.
Now, didn't they have lockdowns on London over there?
They did. They had lockdowns, two separate lockdowns in the UK, which obviously did a lot of damage to small and medium-sized companies.
Mm-hmm.
Which is going to be an issue for at least a decade, if
Yeah.
not longer.
Mm-hmm. They did damage here too when it came to businesses. Like a lot of small businesses went out of business basically, and
Mm.
that's what they did. They started first they enforced the masks, and then they went in and they told people like who owned restaurants that you can't open your doors to them anymore. So restaurants had to close, and then after a while they allowed them to use like fast food drive up, or people could have the food brought out to them in the parking lots and stuff like that. But that's
In,
that.
inter, in, Interestingly enough, I was watching a lot of Lewis Rossman at the time, the US rights repair advocate, and he was based in New York at the time, so he was filming the intake of restaurants and facilities at the time, and seeing lack of customers.
Yeah. Now, what amazed me most about that was I knew that our government had a pretty strong reach, okay, but I didn't I didn't imagine that our government's power actually could extend right down into the store. You know what I mean? Literally close these stores down like that.
That was generally done by state level,
Yeah, I mean that's still
as far as
government
I'm
though
concerned.
too. I mean,
Yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? I
Uh,
mean
I mean,
it's
compared to federal,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You know, I mean, to me that was amazing that they had that much power to where they could go into storefronts and just literally put people out of business. You know,
Well,
um,
I'm using the New York example because, as we all know, New York since the so-called beacon on the hill for the state. Yeah, New York, especially under the previous mayor, was somewhat, dare I say, corrupt.
yeah. Did you hear what happened to him with that whole situation? He was
Uh, I was following at the time. Yeah, yeah, can't carry
he
on.
he was getting on the internet and he was talking live to all these people on the internet about all this great stuff New York was doing and how they were dealing with COVID and stuff like that, right? But what he wasn't bothering to tell people was that he was taking elderly people and literally freaking putting them in a nursing homes where they didn't have room, and these elderly people were like dying left and right because they were catching COVID and dying from it. And he literally just overlooked that whole thing, didn't even know it was going on. You know, getting up on the internet and talking all this great stuff while his administration is doing all this stuff behind his back, or not even him, not even knowing. Like, I guess he didn't care about it, you know.
Not sure about not knowing. But that we come into another issue here, where civil servants are meant to be answerable to government officials,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn is answerable to public. But there has been certain cases, especially in the UK, where the civil service has ignored and done the one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, in the UK, the border force and immigration issue is a good example of this.
And you know, for me, when I talk about government, those are the people that I'm referring to. You know what I mean? I'm referring to what you refer to as like civil servants and stuff. You know,
Mm,
people that
mm,
work in government offices and everything. And when I see the stuff that's going on, what I see is you have people who are holding these positions that are hired and fired, and they don't have to worry about being elected into office and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So,
there's there's an old 1980s series called Yes Minister. Yes, Prime Minister. Yes, Minister. And and I remember there was a interesting little sketch in which one of the government officials turned around and said that ministers come and go, governments come and go once every 4 or 5 years, but civil servants are there for life, or there for the long term.
yeah.
Um, and the power really
Yep.
is related to the civil service.
Yeah, and see, that's one thing that really sticks to me when I think about it. Like, how much power are we willing to just hand over to these people? And this isn't even just talking about, like, you know, elected officials. It's not even talking about that. You
Mm.
know, I'm talking about people that are freaking behind the scenes, that are actually government workers, that every time we turn around and we give up our rights so that they can do what we should be doing ourselves, they become stronger. You know what I mean?
Thankfully, or at least in theory, these public servants, call them public servants rather than civil servants, because that's what they in fact are. Have certain rules. There's the Nolan doctrine, which is part of the Civil Service Code of Conduct, which is in turn part of the Civil Service Employment Contract, which states that they've got to be objective. They've got to follow government dictates, um, and they've got to be honest and civil. Um, if they fail to do that, in theory, they could be criminally prosecuted under conspiracy to commit misconduct in the public office, or conspiracy to commit malfeasance in the public office.
Mm-hmm.
But this is very rarely done in this country.
See, that was going to be my next question, because you keep saying "in theory," so that's like I know
Yeah,
that I
in
should
theory.
ask. Okay,
Yeah.
so when was the last time that you've heard of that actually taking place?
Off the top of my head, I just recall. I think there was a case several years ago, possibly 10 years ago now, in relation to the Department of Works and Pensions. Um, um, pushing sanctions on a clients illegally, and the civil servant involved was prosecuted. I'm not sure if he was convicted though. This person was convicted though.
Now, those would be more. That would consist more of statutes, right? When it comes to what you're talking about with the rules and everything that are set down, that would be more of your statutory laws, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would
Only issue here is that certain laws are not written extremely well. They can be vague in nature, and hence why we've got a judicial system to interpret those laws.
see that's good to know because I really, from what I've heard from you, I mean, it sounds like your parliament's falling apart over there.
Well, at the moment, yeah.
Kind of go through that too because we were talking about that in chat and we never had a conversation about that on the stream yet. Like, give us a little feedback on live stream about what you were referring to on that when we were in the chat, because
Remind me.
well, I can get in chat right now and read it to you if you want me to.
Please do.
Okay. You were saying that parliament government doesn't suck per se. However, that cannot be said for the current makeup of the UK and the devolved, i.e., English, Northern Ireland, Welsh, and Scottish regional governments and the principal opposition parties. So, before that,
That's lots. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. We have seen over the last couple of governments, and remember that we've had what, 4 governments in the last 5 years?
mm-hmm.
5 years. Well, they're all been conservative governments, but yeah, the individual prime minister is not. That's another thing. We do not vote for prime ministers in this country. We technically vote for parties, whereas in the America, where in the US, there's more of an emphasis on voting for individual members. So you vote for a president rather than a party.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, going back to the previous point, we've seen in relation to things like Brexit and COVID, oh, not so much COVID, but Brexit and the European Human Rights, European Commission on Human Rights, that our government has been extremely weak on.
Yeah.
In relation to things like migration and the Northern Irish imports between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK.
Now, see right there, when it comes to that kind of stuff, that's what I was talking about with England. And like in the United States, the Constitution, it sets out the boundaries for the federal law. You know what I mean? So like, these usually consist of like acts of Congress, treaties ratified by the Senate, and then it also talks about regulations and treaties and trade agreements and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Everything is set in the Constitution about and the Bill of Rights as well. You know, I ain't gonna leave out the Bill of Rights, but and I only include the first 10. I don't really agree with the other ones after that, but the Bill of Rights was a good idea. That's my take on it.
As in the 1689.
All right,
Yeah.
but you know, my whole thing is though is all that stuff is set up when it comes to foreign policy as well as internal. Like the Constitution not only goes according to trade between states and stuff like that and regulations, but it also extends to other countries. You know what I mean? The Bill of Rights especially does too. It protects United States citizens outside of the United States as well as inside of the United States. So,
Up to a point.
well, even your Bill of Rights, protects you on foreign soil as well, because that your Bill of Rights is what gives England the right to go into other countries and say, look, he's a citizen of our country. You have to obey our Bill of Rights according to that citizen.
Again, in theory, it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, no, like Turkey. They'll keep you in a Turkish prison. They don't care what your Bill of Rights are. So, but that's what I was talking about when it comes to constitutional law. You know what I mean? I was like, the Constitution for England. Now, who actually drew up the Constitution for England?
It's been, well,
I mean,
in
the first one.
making for over 1,000 years.
No, I mean, who was
no individual.
You guys never had like a political party that sat down and said, "These are freaking this is our Constitution."
There was a concept where under Tony Blair's government they started to think about this and started to create a new Bill of Rights, but it never actually got anywhere. I think there is talk about that yet again.
Now, what about your Constitution?
Constitution again. The Constitution is a number of different acts that have been made up and been changed within the last 1,000 years. You've got to remember that we are a much more older country than the US.
Yeah, but you got to realize, okay, like everybody has this crazy idea, like the American Revolution was the whole springboard for revolution, and that's not the truth. Okay,
no.
England actually started it all. Constitutional governments sprung off of John Locke. You know what I mean? John Locke was the godfather or the grandfather of constitutional law, and while we were having our United States Constitution or revolution against you guys, there was frickin' revolutions going on all over Europe. I mean, one country after the other one was doing it, you know? I mean, it wasn't just the United States.
In France in, 1790? Remember the exact time? Around 1719. 90. The English in the English Civil War.
Poland.
1600. I remember off the top of my head.
Poland, Sweden, all of them. They were all revolting. It wasn't just the United States, is what I'm saying. It might have been revolutionary back then when they heard that the United States had done it, but it was already a thought that was in progress. You know what I mean? People were
Mm.
talking about constitutional government before it even happened here in the United States. Is my whole point. Um, that's why it
Technically,
surprises
France
me.
is technically France is after the American. I mean, 1766 in America and 1790 in France.
Mm,
And you've got to also consider that certain countries, as we know them now, didn't even exist at the time.
right.
Germany wasn't
Yeah.
a unified country until 1880.
Yeah, but they were Prussia though too. Like you had
Yeah,
Russia
well,
and
yeah,
then
there was a
Prussia.
number of different, yeah, there was a number of different sovereign states.
Hmm. And
Uh,
all of them were revolting though. I mean, they were they. I mean, constitutional governments were popping up left and right. It wasn't just the United States, and that's what
mm,
amazes me because like all of it really started in England. You know, went off with their head came into power, and he said, "You know what? I'm
mm,
sick of kings, because you know why? Those kings they just want to do bad things." So what did he do? He let
technically, I would disagree. The king at the time wanted to increase taxes without the approval of Parliament on hence the creation of the English Civil War.
yeah,
Um, mm,
pretty interesting stuff, man. Like that's something we do need to get into and discuss too. Like because Cromwell was a very fascinating guy. I know you're not a Cromwell
Indeed.
fan, and that makes it even better because then me and you can have a good conversation about it. You
Not
know.
sure if I can call myself a fan.
No, I said you're not a fan.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
know you're not a Cromwell fan, but you know, I think with me and you, we should sit down, gather some information together, and just have a conversation about it, about
Mm,
Cromwell. That would be pretty good.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Needs more research.
well, now when it comes to the EU, okay, and what has been happening with your guys' what do you call it? The human rights, European human
The
rights thing.
European Commission on Human Rights.
Could you kind of explain that a little bit more in detail? Kind of let people on here know what that's all about.
It is a complicated subject, but the one of the sort of most obvious um, usage of the ECHR at the moment is in relation to migration. Um, um, in in which the ECHR, i.e., what is technically termed as a national law for the part of the world, requires we to open up our doors and allow migrants to come into this country. Whereas the United Nations Act of Migration, rules on migration, states that um, I want to say immigrants. Yeah, let's just use immigrants as a actual phrase. Requires those individuals to enter the next safest country in if their their own country is in conflict or set out laws that is damaging to the citizens. Those individuals can enter the next country that is in peacetime. That's peaceful. So, but what we are seeing at the moment is these migrants entering, going from one country to a peaceful country to another peaceful country, and then ending up in UK. According to and under ECHR rules, there are strict definitions of what can be if those migrants can be removed from this country. And it creates a situation where we've got lawyers to say, well, these people have entered our country illegally or legally, and they cannot be removed.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of reminds me though that goes back even further with you guys though, because remember, you guys had an issue before when it came to gypsies, when it came to them migrating into England. I think it was happening in Spain as well.
Okay, I'm not really too concerned about historical sort of
No, this
migration.
is
I'm more interested in
this is within the last
legislation is concerned.
this is within the last 40 years. It's not like way back when.
Again, remember, we didn't join the EU until John Major's time. So 92, 93 with the Maastricht
Yeah,
Treaty.
that would have been at least 30 years, right there. Like, so I mean, what is it? 2023 now. So yeah, that'd have been like 33 years from 1990. But I remember you guys you guys were having issues with gypsy population and stuff, and Spain was also having problems with it. They were having it really bad in Spain. Like, people were freaking coming in and creating entire gypsy camps and stuff underneath bypasses, under interstates.
I'm not sure if there was in the UK. I'm not sure if there was a migration issue, or if that was just a more localized issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more of a localized thing.
Yeah, that could have been, because you guys have always had gypsies in England. They've been there, the Rom and all that. And I remember that.
Buffalo communities, yeah.
So that was one thing that stuck out to me when it comes to that. And then like Poland, the one thing I noticed about with your guys' situation is it's like all these migrants are turning into the situation we have with Mexico, here in the United States, with immigrants coming across the border at overwhelming numbers, and then cheap trade, you know what I mean? Like, Poland is doing that now with the EU. It seems like everything cheap's coming from Poland, you know what I mean?
Well, the good thing, I think that's we find with countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic is that they are attempting to ignore ECHR rules and EU rules. And the interesting thing there is that the EU itself is not signed up to the ECHR rules, but individual countries within the EU are. So the EU itself can ignore those rules, but the countries within the EU cannot, or technically cannot.
Yeah, see, the more I hear, the more it sounds like the EU is just another way of trying to form what we have when it comes to federal government.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
But the federal state of Europe or
yeah.
European Union.
I don't think that would be a good idea, to be honest with you, because
Definitely not.
it, um, it history in Europe shows what happens when you try to do stuff like that. Like everybody talks about the World War I and how you had the Allies and the Axis, okay, and World War
You,
II. Do you
you've got to
realize?
consider that. Yeah, you've got to consider that the US is a much more um, mogam, much more of a closer sort of country. In fundamentally, they all share common culture. They all share
Mm-hmm.
a common rule set. Whereas in Europe, each individual country has its own long history,
Mm-hmm.
its own independent culture.
Exactly, and like you look at it too, like when people tried to conquer other areas, like just through freaking warfare, okay?
Mm.
Stuff like that. How many countries or how many wars was there before World War I where there was 5 countries against 5 countries in Europe? You know what I mean? Like there was all like what was the Spanish Succession? There was like 6 countries against 4 countries going against one another, and then you had the what was it, the 20-year war, I believe it was.
Mm.
You know that one had freaking tons of them too. Like in Europe, when a war breaks out, it's not just one country against another one. You're gonna have at least freaking.
Mm,
It's gonna be
it
an all out.
can be,
I mean,
depends.
it's gonna be a massacre, man. Seriously, it will. If anything goes wrong with this European Union, um, it's gonna go south, and it's gonna go south quick. So if they really think they know what they're doing, they better think about it, because it's not a very wise decision to be tampering with Europe like that. And I say that above any other, uh, what would you call it, a continent? I, I wouldn't even say that about the Middle East or Africa or freaking the United States or Americas, you know what I mean? But Europe, I would say that. I would say don't mess with them, because if you start
EU
tampering,
rather than Europe. I really dislike the how Europe is being used as a simile for the EU,
yeah,
because there are countries outside of the EU, such as UK, technically, Switzerland, Norway,
no,
and the
Turkey
other
too,
countries.
isn't it? Turkey's not a part of
Yeah,
the EU.
Tur- Turkey's well, Turkey spans 2 continents, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's both Europe and Asia. So is Russia.
yeah. Now Russia is another issue right there too. Like that's one of the reasons why I think the big deal with Ukraine started, was because the EU and the UN and the NATO were slipping in there with their offers to join the EU, and Russia caught them with their fingers in the cookie jar, and that's why I think a lot of that started.
It's more related to NATO membership, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Um,
it started out
well,
that
the
way.
EU member. But again, it, a country joining both the all NATO isn't a thing that happens overnight.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of time for these, and I believe that
Well, we
Ukraine tried to join NATO, and it was voted down.
no, we had a conversation about that too when it came to England. Like after you guys did Brexit, you guys are still going through paperwork to get out of frickin' the EU, aren't you?
Do I even know? We still are technically no.
Like you literally,
And
England had to actually fill out paperwork to frickin' leave the EU, right?
yeah,
That's insane.
and and it could be an issue if Labour becomes the next government within the next 12 months. We could ask for the leaders to join back, not rejoin, but join again with the EU under a different set of conditions.
Oh man. So there's gonna be consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't see it's happening, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, I want to be professional like you've been telling me to be. We've got 1 hour and 1 minute that we've been recording, so that's not including the stream to set up the audio beforehand. So we have it at the hour. Before we go, is there anything else you want to say?
This entire thing is a very complicated sort of issue, and we could spend a lot longer discussing that. But yeah, I think this is a good time to break.
Yeah, and we can at a later time because all the good stuff, like I said, is going to come later. I wanted to discuss this before getting into civil law
Use this as a
and stuff like that. You know, this is the fundamentals. This is what people really need to know. You know, when it comes to constitutional government and what's going on in the world today, because I don't think too many people know much about this stuff. You know. And I appreciate you helping out, man, and being here. So I appreciate that, Mark. And
Cool.
I'll see you later, all right, man?
Indeed.
All right. Thanks.